Hello my internet friends, and welcome to our Georgia suburban homestead. We got a bit of a harvest of mushrooms today, and I've actually got about two large baskets or colanders and everything else of mushrooms. On top of that, my bags are starting to come in, produce some mushrooms for me. So I decided to make some beef stroganoff. Now, I'm going to call it beef stroganoff, but I'm going to have to make a few substitutions because Lisa got bitten by a Lone Star tick and is now allergic to beef and most other red meats. And I can't do milk products, so we're going to have to substitute that also. We're going to use chicken, and then we're going to use soybean based butter and sour cream substitute, and instead of Dijon mustard I'm going to use a honey maple mustard because it's chicken instead of beef. So let me get the ingredients ready and I'll go over the ingredients in a second. Okay, I've finished chopping up the vegetables. If you can see those, yes, you can see those. I've finished chopping up the vegetables. I've got my skillet on the eye warming up with a little oil in it. Now, you may, when you're warming your skillet up, always warm it up before you put the food in. As you're warming it up, you may see some little bitty bubbles form. Those bubbles are telling you it's been too long since you used your iron skillet, and it's absorbed a little bit of moisture in it, so we want to drive that moisture back out before we put any food in there. So I'm going to move that oil around and make sure it coats the whole pan, at least the bottom part. I'm not going to move it up on the sides too far. And then I'm going to add a bunch of butter, or imitation butter, and saute those mushrooms. I will then put those mushrooms back in their bowl and do the onions. That's a nice bit of mushrooms there. And it may take a few minutes for them to get kind of cooked. Now, you always want to cook your mushrooms. The reason being, they're made out of a similar protein to what your skin is made out of. And you don't do a very good job of digesting that protein. So you cook it to help start breaking down that protein, make it easier for your body to break it down into the peptides and get some nutrients out of it. So always cook your mushrooms. On top of that, those little button mushrooms you get from the stores, the ones they grow on the cow manure and horse manure, they actually produce a chemical that in large volumes is used to power torpedoes, believe it or not. But in small volumes, if you ingest that chemical, well, it's considered a carcinogen. So you always cook those as well to break down that chemical. Turn these up a little bit. I've cooled off my pan. I don't want it to get too cool. Get these good and sauteed. You might get some fluid back out of them, especially if you wash them real well. But some of that fluid is actually coming out of the mushrooms as the heat causes that protein to shrink up a little. You kind of want that shrinking because it helps to burst the cell walls. And the bursted cell walls are then easier to have digestive enzymes get into them. So, too much water came out, not really sauteing them that much anymore. They're more kind of a boiling. But, they smell good. I can't turn that heat up too much more. But you can see they're not taking up near as much volume in the skillet as they were when I first put them in here. They've shrunken up a bit, squeezing out that fluid. So that'll give us a good taste. Let me get some hot pads and get them back into their bowl. Put a little more olive oil in there. Let mushroom juice kind of removed a lot of oil from the pan. Make sure that pan is good and coated with oil. And the mushrooms will likely do a better job of sauteing without producing a lot of fluid. The puppies have come into the kitchen in the hopes that I will spill some stuff. Always hopeful, my dogs. But chicken along with them. Alright, that's basically taking up all the oil. So I'm going to add the broth. And let that broth cook that chicken and continue cooking the onions. Alright, so at this point you might want to get your noodles on. Wide egg noodles. Everybody likes some wide egg noodles. Okay, that's starting to warm back up. About the time that chicken gets cooked, we'll add the mushrooms back in and the sour cream and a little bit of mustard. Now, if you like my recipe, I also have a recipe for linguine and clown sauce that I came up with, and I have a recipe for fessengine. There's a good story about the fessengine recipe. Seems I got a marriage proposal from a mother when I cooked fessengine once. I might make that a story, spinning a yarn story. That broth is starting to come back to a boil. Which means it's about ready to actually start cooking that chicken down through. You can see that the onions have become somewhat transparent now. Alright, let's fall back to our boil. So now we'll put the mushrooms and their juice back in. Take some mustard. I don't know, maybe a tablespoon and a half, because it is kind of sweet mustard. I'm gonna mix some fluid back into it. Couple of tablespoons of sourdough starter. I'm not using a regular measuring tablespoon. It won't matter too much anyway, because a bit of your starter is going to stay on your spoon. So, there's our mustard, a little bit of fluid, and sourdough starter mix. Now we'll turn this down. And mix in my imitation sour cream. Now, if you want measurements, you're going to have to go online. I'm going to use about a half a tub, which I think is about 6 ounces. Get that mixed into the fluid. So I am going to mix the mustard and sourdough starter in, and that should thicken up my sauce a bit. If not, I can just get some regular flour, do the same thing. Oh yeah, that's nice. Whoop. Charlie's gonna have to clean the stove. So I'm going to turn that down, strain out the noodles, and serve it. Alright folks, if you enjoyed that and you haven't subscribed yet, hit subscribe, maybe give me a thumbs up. Might even try making this yourself. But see you later.